After years of hard work, you finally made it. You're at the Seafoam Gala itself, one of the most important regional galas taking place in the entire western direction. It's a gathering so large and influential that being the limelight of a party brings more opportunities than the stars themselves, while a single mistake can ruin a sovereign or merchant prince's reputation for years, if not decades to come. Everything is going better than a voyage with placated storm mothers, until you start hearing odd rumors. Rumors that you're engaging in piracy. That's preposterous. You're a respectable privateer. You honor all letters of marque written in the name of the Ocean Father, just like the rest of your less successful peers in the gala itself. Things suddenly take a turn for the worse when the representative from the nation of the Skullstone Archipelago openly accuses you of illegal piracy and has evidence to back this up. You can feel the stares of your once respected peers staring daggers in your back. The slightest mistake here means losing nearly all the connections and trust you've carefully built up over the years with the Admiralty Board. You'll need to choose your next words very carefully. Welcome back. What I presented to you is one such example of how social drama and tension can be factored into a game. It's, in my opinion, one of the two absolute core essential systems of the game. And that's just like because in real life, social banter can happen almost anywhere. Love can be found on the battlefield just as much as a fancy party. But what is social conflict? Social conflict is a method of settling differences by words rather than action. A playground where words are your weapon and your core beliefs are your shield and armor. If the warrior of your group cannot lay an enemy low with his golden sword, then why not bring out the silver tongue? Maybe you can make that creature stand aside, or possibly even become one of your greatest allies. With a robust social influence system, all this and more can be yours. As I mentioned in the previous videos, one of Exalted 3rd Edition's greatest strengths is actually a robust social system where those skilled with words can be every bit as effective as those with skill at arms. Social conflict in Exalted is quite a bit different than the combat system. The only feature both remotely share is that they both have D10 dice pools. No, compared to the strict mechanical rigor combat seems to live and die by, quite literally, social conflict tends to be far more narrative in approach. This is because it's up to the player to decide how the character's own morals and values could be applied to defense against social influence on a case-by-case basis. This means that there's a lot more modifiers involved, even in relatively white room social scenes, because of how contextual all this is. So today we'll be discussing everything to consider when managing social influence in Exalted 3rd Edition. We'll be discussing the creation of NPCs as people, delve into how to create a complex relationship web, and cover how charms play into the system overall. I'm going to assume that prior to watching this video, you've watched the other videos in this series and that you've at least read the book. If not, I highly recommend pausing the video and doing so now. The most important video of this will be the third one about the mechanics of Exalted, with part 1 going over the dice pool mechanics and part 3 going over the mechanics of the more narrative bits of the social system and how each of the actions work. Lastly, I'd highly recommend the excellent Social Influence 301 by Jet Bastard on the RPG.net forums for an excellent example of how to use the system. As always, I'll have such things linked down below in the description. This video is meant more of a Tier 2 introduction to social influence in Exalted. If Tier 1 is being familiar with the basic aspects of social influence in Exalted 3rd Edition, then Tier 2 is understanding things such as how to make intimacies for NPCs quickly and how the charms interact with social influence. So if you at least haven't read the book, the 301 tutorial, or my past videos, again, I highly recommend doing so now. If you're familiar with the Exalted 3rd Edition mechanics, however, then feel free to continue watching this video and mock me for things I miss. For those watching the video, the game I'm playing today is Touhou Luna Nights. It's a short, very fun Metroidvania-style game. Apologies for also taking this video so long to get out. Good old-fashioned life got in the way, combined with writer's block of what the hell to actually put into this. I'll wholeheartedly admit I feel something's off about the content in this video, but I'm not overly sure what, even when I had it read through with proofreaders. Let me know down in the comments below if I missed something major. I'll more than happily do a part B for this video if need be. Well, enough yakking, let's get into it. Part 1. Creation of NPCs as people. The first part of making a character, a player character or non-playable character, ready for social conflict doesn't begin with any math, but involves something deeper. It involves trying to build them up as a real person. A person that has their own core beliefs, ideals, and ties that bind them to the world. Other games may have such thing be a playstyle that you might adhere to on a character in a purely narrative sense. But in Exalted, they provide real, tangible benefits or issues that come up in play. This begins with the assignment of a character's intimacies. These should reflect what the values of a character are and help flesh out his experience in relation to the world around him, be it their ideals and principles or physical relationship to the world and ties. Intensity is how strongly someone feels about a certain thing, ranging from using effort to maintain it or being a core and central part of someone's life. I'm going to repeat what I said in an earlier video about how intensity and intimacies work in this game narratively, because it's incredibly important from going on from this point forward. Minor intimacies are things a character believes in, but are not essential parts of their lives. They'll try to follow and live up to them, but only if it doesn't conflict with a higher intimacy or current self-interest. For example, that restaurant you like, that's probably a minor intimacy. I mean, you like going to it, right? If you're in the area, you have some time to kill, and you have a few bucks, then why the hell not? Liking someone at this level means that you're willing to support them, at least so long as it doesn't severely inconvenience you. For things like principles or beliefs, it means that such things are just starting to sink into you. Think of it like taking up a small interest in a subject, for example, like being bitten by the history bug. In your spare time, you'll read up on historical topics that interest you, but you won't let it get in the way with a date with your wife, your best friend, or your 9-to-5 job. Major intimacies are things your character deeply believes in and help form core parts of their identity and life. These are things that your character likely spends considerable amount of time on, involved, or thinking about them. At this point, a character is willing to experience some discomfort or risk serious bodily harm in order to uphold them or protect them. An intimacy of this strength with a tie to your country, likely you're willing to even go to war and fight for your country. You're not a suicidal zealot, and you'll turn down requests from your country that will put you in serious harm with overwhelming likelihood, but you'll fight for them. For example, this means that you'll gladly fight against other enemy soldiers, but if the commander orders you to fight against that giant silver snake with teeth like knives that swallows up a half a dozen men with every single bite, you're likely going to tell him to piss off unless he has something up his sleeve. Your love of history has now led you to watching YouTube videos on them until 2 in the morning, even though you're pretty sure they have work the next morning. If you're younger, this could be a turning point where you seriously consider becoming a historian, even if the future job prospects are virtually nothing. Such as my friend, or myself. Oh, where did I go wrong in life? Defining intimacies are core, central parts of your lives. They are things your character has in their mind all the time and will bitterly defend against them with all their might. At this rank, characters will put themselves at significant risk in order to uphold these intimacies, not just risking serious bodily harm, but even putting their lives on the line. A friendship at this rank is less of a friendship and more like an oath of brotherhood that the 3 brothers from the Han Dynasty did. You will move fucking mountains for this friend. If he's murdered, the only reason you wouldn't be at his funeral is because you'd be in jail for killing his murderer. Your principle of history at this rank is so strong that you're Indiana Jones. Sure, they may complain about all the troublesome traps and conspiracies trying to stop you, but you fight your way through those overwhelming odds and still go into those trap-filled ruins. This doesn't mean that you'll blindly run in like an idiot. You'll still do things such as research the ruins or find out some information on the fortress that your sworn brother was taken to. So now that we know these levels of intimacies, let's do a little example on how to assign such intimacies. Let's say that you want to play as a military general. The very way you build your intimacies could shape an overall reflection of your character. For example, a principle of swift and thoughtful action saves lives. Swift and thoughtless action ends them. Immediately paints your general as more of a wise character that values the lives of his men and what happens to fools who rush in heedlessly. Likewise, a general with the principle of, I will rule the 100 kingdoms or see it burn to ash around me, will paint you as a ruthless warlord who do anything to further his own ambition. Ties are a lot more transparent since they're based off actual people, places, and things. Have intimacies related to the high life such as my palace estate, or something even as simple as upper class living, could paint your character as a noble elite. Intimacies such as Mount Sambuca for your meditation spot, or stiff beer, paints your character as someone a bit more down to earth. Even where intimacies are placed on the intimacy list in intensity also has a great effect on how deeply a character views such things. Take our two generals for example. If both intimacies I mentioned are at the minor level, then it could likely mean several things. If the swift and thoughtful action intimacy was a minor intimacy on our young general, remember, a minor intimacy means that something has influence over a character but isn't a core part of what they are. That means he's either likely still being trained, relatively inexperienced, or had something nasty happen to him recently to form such an intimacy. Just by prodding, you can learn even more vectors on how to approach such a thing. For example, let's say you make another roll to learn more about this intimacy. Maybe with another read intentions roll, we were making a lore, socialize, or war roll to see if you heard such a saying before. You would learn that this phrase was possibly said by the general Rhaegar Carral. Suspecting this, you can make a read intentions action, and lo and behold, you can see that this intimacy towards Rhaegar Carral exists at the major level. This forms another connection you could try to pivot around, particularly if you know the context of the intimacy. A young general who looks to his mentor with starry-eyed rapture might do incredible things to catch the notice of his mentor. But one who seems to have nothing but contempt or disdain for her could lead to more interesting questions. Is this general gradually being worn down from the hard lessons by Rhaegar Carral, or is there something more involved with this? Could this even be eventually used as a method to make an agent willing to trust you and do things for you if it means the fall of Rhaegar Carral? See what I mean? Just some innocent little questions made up on the fly for intimacies can lead to drastically different outcomes or approaches of how the players might handle such a character in a social fashion. Now, making a rich character worthy of the Oscars isn't your goal. As I said in previous videos, and will continue to say, such characters are only often possible when a writer has total creative control with time to consider their actions and personality. An RPG is literally the exact opposite. You have no control over the players are going to choose to do or say, and quite often you need to make up such actions on the spot. But there are a few life hacks one can use to order to make this process a little easier. One good recommendation is use a stereotype to help represent and fit the character. A stereotype means a preconceived notion of a person in your mind. A more pulp culture term for them would be tropes or cliches. The hot-blooded hero, the cold, calculating prince, and the bubbly princess are all things that immediately spring up as images in our heads. Thinking about such things provide an immediate framework for us to start with and move on from there. This is important as ideally you should have some sort of end goal for what role the character is supposed to fill, as this helps guide your intimacy choices for them. Another option you can use to help guide a character is what drives them. We're going to borrow the second edition concept of motivation here, which is the one thing that character wants to do more than anything. It drives their choices and propels them forward. With both a stereotype and motivation in hand, it should be much easier to nail down intimacies. I'll give an example of this in a little bit. But at the same time, you need to be careful to not go too far in the other direction and make the character too one-dimensional. I'll happily admit that originality is overrated so long as you give a good concept, but try to vary it up a bit. An example of varying it up could have our hot-blooded hero be quite capable in most situations, but becomes rash and loses his temper when his friends or loved ones are put in danger. The cold prince could actually have a heart of gold, but his heartless self is only a mask he dons in the treacherous noble court he's forced to interact with daily. Our bubbly princess could be a total airhead when it comes to social situations, but she might be a 1 in 1,000 genius at math or history. Another example could be stacking these stereotypes. For example, the princess might act like a bubbly airhead with cute looks, but actually has a heart so vile that even a demon would wonder who the real monster is. A lot of people might sneer at this sort of approach, finding that it makes people caricatures rather than actual people. But again, you're not a professional writer. Don't feel bad about doing this until you get a bit more used to improv. Now, how do we make intimacies work for our characters? That is, giving them enough details to make them fleshed out as a person, but with hooks to make them interesting. Ties are fairly simple: a person, place, or a thing. A stiff beer, your homeland, your company, your kingdom, your horse, or your lunar waifu. All of these things are ties that one can possibly have. But remember, more than one waifu will destroy your lifu. Principles are a bit different. They're often philosophies that drive your character's beliefs. Allot's "I abide neither cowards nor traitors" is a good example of this, as it pretty clearly lays out what a straightforward war god thinks of cowardice and traitors. Popular sayings can also flesh out a character. With great power comes great responsibility principle at the defining level means that you essentially take after Spider-Man, using your gifts for the betterment of the world and those around you. A principle of "it's not the great who are strong, but the strong who are great" is likely the exact opposite. Just by hearing that, you'd figure the character is nothing but a ruthless warlord or a psychopath. But what if such a person had a strong tie to their homeland? In that case, it means doing whatever you can to strengthen your country. For example, you might call weakness within the ranks of your own troops, but such a person could respect and honor those who display roughly similar power, or even treat those under him like gold if they constantly aspire for greater personal strength. Let's fold together a quick example using our heartless prince from earlier. If he's a cold bastard on the outside with a heart of gold on the inside, we're going to need to build this up. First, in order to do this, he probably has to be a man of strong character. After a bit of research, you decide to use the Chinese philosopher Mencius's definition of a man of character, which work perfectly well for this prince. And full apologies if I butchered his name. You might want to put down Mencius's man of character lessons as a single catch-all intimacy, but this is a big mistake. First, you're likely wondering what the hell that actually means. Second, it's overly broad. It could mean many things to the point of being a catch-all intimacy that can be used in almost any circumstance, and such a thing should be avoided. I mean, there's nothing wrong with broad intimacies, but when one intimacy can be literally everything, then you might have a bit of a problem. So let's break Mencius's man of character definition down some more. 1. Neither riches nor honors can corrupt him. 2. Neither poverty nor humbleness can swerve him from principle. 3. Neither forces nor threats can subdue him. All these can make excellent intimacy examples. They say a lot about the character. They hit a sweet spot for being broad, but just narrow enough not to apply to everything, and they complement each other beautifully. We can use the "neither riches nor honors can corrupt him" as the defining intimacy. This would make sense with him being one of the only straight nobles in a corrupt kingdom. Neither threats nor forces can subdue him could be a major principle, allowing him the determination and willpower needed to walk through the corrupt noble court, and with other nobles knowing damn well that this prince is going to back up his threats if they do manage to glean his intimacies. The last saying, "neither poverty nor humbleness can swerve him from principle," could be a minor intimacy, perhaps degraded after his icy heart thawed out while helping children in the city. In fact, this could be even supported more by saying he has a major tie towards children. Perhaps his history involved a change of heart with him not being such a tight ass all the time. Presto! We made a perfect introduction packet of intimacies for a social character. There's intimacy at every level, we have a fourth intimacy to help with repelling social attacks, and we have an intimacy that's bound to cause some problems or issues down the line. The last point isn't a bad thing. In fact, it's far from it. It gives a storyteller more hooks to use on the character, allowing them to weave them into the story far more seamlessly. In fact, you may notice two of his intimacies may conflict. The care for his children and "neither poverty nor humbleness can swerve him from principle." This is not a mistake. What it means in regards to the system is that the person has conflicting intimacies, turmoil in his own heart that he must either quell or ignore. In fact, one could very well have both positive and negative intimacy for the same person at the same time. What matters in the story is seeing which of these two feelings win out. A dragon-blooded husband could have a minor intimacy in immaculate faith, but a love of his wife who exalted as a foul anathema. Would he stay true to his faith, or will love save the day? The only way to answer that is that the story run its course. If you want a good shortcut of how to assign intimacies to people, do as I said previously and just take characters from pieces of media you already know and alter them until they become brand new characters. For example, if I take Adam Jensen from Deus Ex Human Revolution, then I already have an archetype I can work with. A gruff, tough-as-nails detective who's driven to find out about the hidden truths and conspiracies about the world. You can add a few other things that changes up a bit. A good example of one of my older NPCs involves just taking Adam Jensen, flipping the gender, and making the character have large regrets about the mistakes she made in the past that she now wishes to correct. In this case, we have the same overall personality as Jensen, but overall goals are different. If people go, hey, this person reminds me of character for something else, then you're on the right track. If people go, this character is literally someone else, is it? Then you went a bit too heavy-handed. Also, don't lock yourself down in thinking that you're only going to assign those intimacies. If during the course of a game, a character, player or non-player, is playing their character in a way that makes sense for them to have another intimacy, go ahead and add them. This shouldn't be done as an ass pull at the last minute to defend against a social influence check, but rather through role-playing. This is because a character may play out differently than what you originally thought, so don't feel bad if you need to do this during a play. If you're a player, ask your storyteller for permission first. And don't confuse intimacies for being largely narration. Oh, no. Nothing could be further than the truth. Intimacies inform not only who you are, but also how to defend against social influence or even amplify certain charms and power. For example, many monsters could have some sort of debuff or try to force you to flee the battle unless you have some sort of intimacy related to courage, valor, or some other thing to justify your bravery. For our prince, he has two options. He could either use his principles neither threats nor forces can subdue him, or if there are children nearby, he could justify standing in front of an unspeakable horror if it meant getting the children safety. Likewise, charms such as Fist of Honor technique gain far more power if one has an intimacy to use it with. So now we know how to make some intimacies that have some proper internal depth and a character to go with them. But now we're ready to plunge in the darker side of things. An area vicious enough to gut you and steal everything you worked hard for in your entire life, all while onlookers look in broad daylight, watch with horrified expressions. So, it's incredibly obvious what I mean. Higher court social functions. Part 2. Web of intrigue and social scene construction. What I call the web of intrigue means a complicated social dynamic structure between everyone involved in a scene or game. Setting the scene for this sort of thing is a little more subtle than most other scenes in games, I feel. So let's learn how to walk before we sprint and delve more in how to construct these sort of social scenes and the complex interactions between each members of them. Social influence is supposed to be a way to represent social conversations in real life. And just like real life, such scenes can happen at anywhere, at any time. Anytime there's going to be a conversation involved could very well have social influence connected to it. Usually, in my experience, I very rarely need to force a way for such a scene to happen, because it can literally happen anytime two characters have a disagreement or an objection to what the other is saying. If a guard's not letting you into the city, instant social influence moment. Are the townsfolk nervous, but you can't find out why? Talking to one of them could be an instant social scene. Wanting to figure out a bit more about someone, but they're trying to keep personal details hidden? Social time! Can we also do social influence during combat as well? Absolutely. There's no such thing as social influence magically becoming irrelevant just because combat begins. That'd be an utterly silly thing to do. In fact, several charms, such as Poised Lion Stance, allows you to more effectively combine blade with word. Several martial arts, such as Crane and Silver Voice Nightingale, excel at such things even. This allows you to fight your opponent, trying to convince them to stop a pointless conflict or last-ditch effort to tell them that the mistress they serve is actually a corrupt, and a noble man like themselves shouldn't be serving such people. Again, this is any time you think a conversation, in theory, could take place. After all, if there's one thing decades of watching anime has taught me, is that the best time to discuss complex philosophical and ideological differences is exactly in the midst of a chaotic battlefield. Trust me on this. The point of this, however, is not to go overboard with it. Social influence should enhance a scene and feel like a natural extension to it, not hammered into every small knot. Do you roll dice to get out of bed in the morning? Then why would you need to roll to ask a random villager why they appear to be setting up for festivities? Unless their culture is being distrustful towards outsiders, there's no need to consume valuable game time or resources for such a roll. Remember the base reason to why rolls are made in RPGs. When there's a chance of failure, and failure has consequences. The consequences for failing a roll of a worried townsfolk could just result in him looking around and nervously saying, "I'm sorry, I gotta go now." A failed roll against a jealous princeling, however, could have far more dire consequences, such as spies trailing you to wherever you may be going, or guards stopping you and searching you all the bloody time. You arouse the suspicion of a prince, so now you're going to have to deal with it. But such things are the simple or impromptu parts of the game. But what do I mean by an actual fleshed out social scene? Usually I consider such social scenes when they have a particular or important role in the overall narrative of a story. If you're a rich and wealthy businessman, then asking a lesser lord to introduce you to a superior isn't a real social scene. At most, you could probably make one or two rolls to help butter him up, bribe him, or anything like that. No, the real meat of this comes with having an audience with the king himself. In this moment, tensions are high, because if you don't bring your best stuff, you could very well walk away with nothing, or in the worst case, get on the king's bad side. Sure, you could kill him, but that won't help you if he's the only person that knows the secret location of a blade that can cut through the veil of nightmares against your Raksha rival. This could be a good example of a high-intensity social counter, as losing means it doesn't lock you out of learning the location of the Dream Eater's sword permanently, but it may make you take the long way around to get it. We could try to directly brute force, recklessly throwing out powerful social charms and attempt to get the king to tell you the location of the blade now, or, if time is less of an issue, you could work your way into the king's good graces. This will take longer, but while most people may take months or even years to do such a thing, you're an Exalt. I'd be shocked if it takes more than several weeks for your relationship to become strong enough to the point where the king can tell you all about the Dream Eater sword and how it protects his city from the shadow that lurks behind the wall. This is a little sidetrack, but a thing I feel needs to be addressed that a lot of people overlook. Time flows differently in the Bronze Age world. In our current world, that is in real life, everything is at our fingertips, from weather to the latest sports scenes. But in something like the Bronze Age world, it takes weeks for news. Hell, the average Sunday edition newspaper today contains more news than a typical medieval peasant would learn in his entire life. Don't worry about rocketing off to the next scene as soon as possible. I mean, you're an Exalt, but even the Dragon-Blooded lives for hundreds of years, whereas Solars can live up to be 2,000. Unless you have the 10,000 dooms approaching you, understand that yes, you can do such things, such as taking some downtime to visit someone for several weeks. Okay, so now we've discussed and know what a high-tension social scene is like. But what about a big fancy party? Page 94 of the 3rd edition Dragon-Blooded book describes the types of parties, from the casual salon meetings or the elaborate galas where the Dragon-Blooded collectively give themselves a pat on the back, with the Sinus family patting everywhere else. Such a thing will often have many people involved in them. Or hell, even a bar after a successful pirate campaign is going to have a fair share of people in it, all of them drunk, happy, and more than willing to blab on about tales, about their adventures, or other tidbits that they probably shouldn't be sharing. So how do you handle such things? Again, it's the same way as in real life. Do what you think is best in the current circumstances. Introduce yourself and get to know someone a bit over idle banter, building up your relationship with them before asking for bigger or more elaborate favors or more intensive prodding. Some people might wear their hearts on their sleeves and wouldn't take long to figure out such simpletons. Others may be a bit more cautious, so it may take some time or resources to properly figure out their inner workings and to get into their good graces. who they are, or what they think about others. Navigating the interpersonal relationships between others is what I call the web of intrigue. It's the process of learning about other people, figuring out what makes them tick, who likes and hates who, and filling up all those juicy rumors of who did what. Now, more often than not, if you're trying to win favor with a mortal, then don't expect it to be overly difficult. The only thing they possess are decision points and intimacy result boosts, which we'll get into later. For those with magical powers specifically tailored to social defense, however, such things could take multiple scenes of constant poking or prodding to learn all about them. More often than not, these social events could very well last for several days. Not just high-class dynasty parties, but even something like a successful pirate campaign. If it was wildly successful, then you bet your ass those sailors are going to be celebrating for several days and nights before waking up with a massive headache and the fleeting thought of those who were devoured by Sakal's children in the final battle were the lucky ones. Now, what's the best way to keep such things updated? You guessed it, it's our old friend the 3x5 card. The easiest way is to write down 4 intimacies and make them have a tie towards someone or something, and then include some background information on the other side. In fact, I highly recommend each person in the group having intimacy towards some other person in the group. Fate Core recommends this for system mechanics of assets, and it helps Fate characters feel connected in an organic fashion. If you have access to the computer, then you have some richer information with you. Save all your notes on Google, Word, or LibreOffice document. If you want to go full conspiracy theory, you can even use a tool such as Google Draw or Microsoft Visio if you have access to that and want to go the extra distance. So yes, make it so Count Manus Falgo has a secret intimacy of lust towards the mistress Madame Scarlet, but Madame Scarlet could very well have an interest in Count Manus Falgo's butler, as she feels that his skills are wasted on the Count. But what if the butler has interest in the Memnion Dyness visiting the palace, realizing that it's probably her ticket out of this place if she makes a good enough impression? However, the Dyness has bitter feeling towards the Count, as she's fairly sure the Count purposely delayed sending out his troops as reinforcements. But at the same time, she plays it cool for now, because her house needs to hold on to this territory, and Count Manus Falgo has some of the best maps around. This is just an example off the top of my head that interweaves each of these characters together with each other. Each character has a vested interest towards one another, and by spending time trying to figure them out, you learn more about the characters and their relationships with each other. The best way of doing this is try making some idle banter. Try asking them a few things in particular. Use nothing overly elaborate at first, just some basic stories about far-off locales, or maybe some gossip about other people. But when asking about specific people, places, or things you suspect they might have an interest in, roll read intentions to try to confirm this. This is important, as read intentions isn't a magical mind reading tool. It needs context to work. This can be done by either talking to the character or by having them in the presence of a tie they care about to see some sort of behavior to justify having an intimacy. Some are going to be fairly obvious. It should be a shock to no one if Immaculate Monk has an intimacy towards the Immaculate Text. In fact, just ask him a question about a particular passage, then challenge him on it. It doesn't matter if you're right or spouting lies. It just provides an option to read intentions. But what if you use read intentions and find out the monk has cardinal interests with you? How interesting for him to go against one of the tenets of the Immaculate Order. Save that bit of interesting trivia for later. Now, why is learning all of this about the opponent important? It's for the same reason as I said in my storyteller guide. The fastest way to get others to agree with you is to appeal to their own self-interest. This is represented in the game by intimacies, and if a character's resolve is beaten and they still refuse, then it's usually someone who's very stubborn, and it takes a special kind of person to ignore a deal that's literally too good to be true, showing up on the doorstep, and them just casually ignoring it. Often, they need some other justification via intimacies in order to resist such a claim. Another good idea to keep in mind is a group cohesion of sorts. Is there some sort of social agenda that the current social group or clique of people are trying to promote? This can be used to help inform the characters of both their intimacies and their goals at a party. For example, A small group of Regara guests could try to pressure those from House Tepet to accept high-interest loans. This could shape their intimacies, or at the very least allow a player to discover the reason why such people are here in the first place. So now we know when social scenes can appear and how to tie people together. The last interesting thing of note should be the location of the social meeting itself. Whenever it's the most lavish Phillips Gala, whose ballroom of flowing music leads to an open balcony overseeing a majestic waterfall, to the back alley bar that a pirate captain picked out for his crew to celebrate in, characters can get details from even the minor things inside such places. The investigation monkey in your group could do a profile character action. Maybe try to ID why the captain always picks this specific bar, or maybe the decor in the Phelps Gala could lead to some sort of hint for some hidden motive to why this party is being held in the first place. Was it erected in a hurry, or were they planning this for some time? Looking at the quality of the food and entertainment, you could probably even judge such things, such as if the host had a particularly big success and that they were rewarded handsomely for, or did they just skim out on the quality for such things and try to hide it using careful preparation methods? Does that mean the host is in dire financial straits? Or maybe they're just throwing it for face value and ultimately don't care about it? Good beginning questions like this often lead to better questions shortly after them. You may also notice the Dragon-Blooded book describes many social gatherings lasting for days at a time. This, I believe, is a very good thing. Not only because time for people in creation would flow differently, as I mentioned previously, but also to cover your resources. If you're going to these galas, then more than likely you're going to be throwing up some of your resources on powering charms. This also helps with making an impression. Getting someone to go from having no intimacy at all towards you to a major one is normally pretty tricky in the course of one scene, but over the course of several days, it's entirely possible. Additionally, it gives you a chance to explore and talk with the other people in the area. But do try to remember to keep other players engaged as well. A stealth character could be looting rooms, or maybe court romance by delivering secret love letters. A character who has a passion for learning new things could talk to other scholars in the room. A general could learn more about the opponents he might face in the future by talking to other soldiers in the room who faced such things before. Even the martial character could engage in formal duels at the party as part of a friendly gesture or when tensions get high and honor is at stake. If you need a good guideline, have one NPC in the big social scene act as a foil to the players, typically having an intimacy set, beliefs, or some sort of goal that go against the player's own. Also have someone who's similar to the players in the area. Make them relatable, if not by having the same goals, then having similar beliefs. So now we have things relatively in the bag. We know all about intimacies, how to make them, how to make a group of people, and how to throw a fancy party. So how do we handle the real meat of the Exalted system? Charms in the context of social influence. Part 3. Intimacies as social defense and social charms. Now, unlike some of the mind-melting nature of trying to understand combat, social charms are far tamer in comparison. In fact, most of what I can say about social charms can typically be boiled down to just watching the social section of my mechanics video and then making either social influence checks automatically succeed, hard to resist, more dice, or some freaky esoteric effects that may actually require a bit more thought. Now, before I begin, I feel the need of an extensive reminder. If you read through some of the social charms, you're probably going to never, ever want to be hit by some of those things. Worse yet, some may be so efficient that it very well may be crush any sort of resolve placed against it. But there are a few potent defenses for this baked in within the core of the social influence system itself. First are intimacies. Yes, I know they're important, but I'm going to keep hammering on this. When channeled for defense, they can boost your resolve up by quite a bit. A resolve of 4 can easily be overcome with someone of a dice pool of 10 dice. But if you have a defining intimacy to resist those words your resolve is going up against, then that resolve goes to 8, and any chance of a person's social influence roll actually breaking this essentially goes down the crapper. But you can point out that dice pools can get really high, up to 20 plus dice with excellencies alone. Not only that, but charms can do such things such as double 9s, reroll numbers, or intimacies being used against you to lower your resolve. The question remains is, how do you defend against all of this? To counteract this, social influence has one of the strongest defenses in the game: willpower. By using your willpower through a decision point, you can not only stop most social influence checks being used against you dead, but force the opponent to enter a reset condition for the social influence check he tried, making it that much harder to use against you in the immediate future. In fact, if you want to be really scummy, one could just let the opponent bypass the resolve and immediately enter a decision point, not even needing to risk the resolve in the first place. Honestly, I feel such a thing should be used a bit sparingly, especially on NPCs. For players, it makes sense, as it's meant as a lever to give you a strong tool to help you keep control of your character. I don't recommend using this for NPCs overly much, because nothing feels more like a sour punch to the balls like making a huge speech, throwing down a bunch of charms, where your opponent goes, nah. For this reason, I have some recommendations on when NPCs should actually use their willpower. It means that when you beat someone's resolve, it means that you've effectively convinced them. Spending a willpower in the decision point means that the character is rejecting what is told for them, going against the little voice in your head that says, this guy smells like he never bathed in his life, but he may be onto something. In this case, I usually only recommend NPCs spend willpower when it goes against their core goal, the very thing they want to accomplish most in the world. The only time they should reconsider otherwise is when things are far too up shit creek that the coming back anytime soon is virtually impossible, or the players manage to use the defining intimacy against them in some way. Now, don't let all social influence attempts go through without contest. But at the same time, if you don't let some social influence through, then the players are going to get real salty real fast. If you want them to give a sense of power, let them be wordsmiths on lesser NPCs before building up to the more stubborn people. And always remember that social influence is supposed to enhance the scene, not completely stonewall people. If you're arguing against a gate guard to be let into the gala, just let a single social influence check through when you intimidate the guard about telling his superiors. After all, the real meat is inside the party. You really don't want to be bogged down by arguing with the guards an endless amount. And if your players get 10 successes, then that's pretty much going to crush their resolve in the first place. Second, remember that you need to channel intimacy in the decision point. I cannot stress this enough. If someone bypasses your resolve and you have no intimacies to repel it, say hello to the successful social influence check against you. One humorous example I heard of online is how one Exalted player basically played up his solo character as a dictator, had no qualms about using slaves to do his work, and beating them whenever they stepped out of line. The group's Zenith decided to twist his intimacy of wanting a perfect state against him, by saying that in order to truly reach a perfect state, then a ruler better needs to take care of his own people. The dictator Solar had no intimacies to repel this, so soon enough he became a dictator that did everything possible to make his people happy. And the lives of his enemies utter hell. The player of the dictator Solar didn't mind this, and overall both players walked away happy with this unexpected twist happening. Think of this as a good method of playing along with social influence checks. If you want more encouragement, consider making this a splat XP boost related to going along with the social influence check, if the group feels like it enhances the story or puts a character more at risk. Don't mistake your guile score either. The best defense against a social attack is making sure others don't even have any intimacies for them to leverage. If they can't leverage any intimacies, then the vectors of approach are extremely narrow, made even more narrow when you start resisting out of the blue with intimacies they don't know about. If knowledge is power, then knowing someone's intimacies will allow you to write them like a book just as well as you can read them. Now this might have seemed like a tangent, and I won't lie and say it wasn't, but I feel it's really important to get out there before I start to going more in depth about charms. Maybe I've been personally soured by it, but I've seen people leave games because a social influence check was successful on their character. The idea of control of their character being taken away from them was anathema, and I don't mean other exalts. But I want to say it isn't the end of the world. In fact, it could very well lead to more interesting stories. All you need to do is just trust the storyteller has the best interest of the player and the group in mind, with the storyteller being mindful of this degree and trust that the players are investing in him in return. Now, where the hell were we? Alright, discussing the various types of social charms that exist. The first type of social charms are those that boost raw numbers. These are things like your harmonious presence meditation or dead tiger symmetry. They're pretty good at increasing your odds of success, but in the end, you're still largely limited to the default social actions. They don't change them in any significant way. Eventually, you do get charms that let you do things a bit more easily, but don't necessarily break the rules of the game. For example, Majestic Radiant Presence makes it so anyone who attempts to take an action against you, physical or social, needs to pay a willpower to do so. This is something you would already do with basic social charms. A successful persuasion, bargain, or intimidation roll can also force people not to attack you or talk back to you, and at most cost them 1 willpower to resist. What Majestic Radiant Presence does, however, is make that effect automatic. Enemies must contest the effects of the charm itself, regardless of whatever their resolve or guile may be. Some charms are what I call intimacy escalation charms. Normally, when you want to increase or decrease the intensity of an intimacy, you have to up the ante on your method. Convincing someone that the Immaculate Order is bad might possibly accept some bad rumors that monks did, or particularly troublesome passages that conflict with some of their other intimacies. You might have to try a little better than, they're totes bad, dude. The thing is, trying to use simple passages or rumors isn't probably going to work a second time. You're going to need to present or fabricate evidence in order for someone's distrust of the Immaculate Order to get any stronger. This doesn't have to be as elaborate as staging a monk for killing a man's wife for heresy. No. This can be easy as something nebulous as having something bad happening in the village, then going, come to think of it, the monks weren't in the temple when that bad thing happened, weren't they? This raises suspicion. However, some charms don't care about this, often just flat out saying, increase or decrease this intimacy by 1 step. This is incredibly powerful and allows you to bypass the normal escalation methods. However, the downsides of these charms is that they're not only rare, but often narrow in scope. Friendship Dissolving Venom of Laughing Monster Style does this, allowing you to create or increase intimacy of distrust on other people very easily in a very small method, but can only do that one type of intimacy. Other charms may specifically require you to have certain intimacies in order to resist them at all, such as needing something related to courage against strong fear-inducing charms, or enchanted fragrant petal fascination kata in Dream for Coercion style that requires enemies to have an intimacy related to things such as temperance or being a prude in order to resist. In which if the opponent has no such things, then this charm is incredibly damn powerful. These are what I call social charms that enhance your social abilities beyond just raw numbers, either by limiting the intimacies one can use or making some effects that automatically happen, but they're still largely within the scope of the system. The system is altered, but things are still fundamentally the same, in a rough sense. Then there's the strange esoteric charms, the ones that do completely new actions within the social system or effects so powerful that you need nearly a dozen successful social influence attempts in order to replicate them. Memory Reweaving Discipline or Hypnotic Tongue Technique are examples of these, both of them doing mind-altering effects that are nowhere near what you can do with social actions alone. Haunting Word Infliction from Dragonblooded or Nameless Monster Embodiment from Lunars are likewise charms that are not exactly replicated in mere social attacks. They're often expensive or deep within charm trees, but god damn do they make people fear the Exalted. Some of these charms don't give the slightest care in the world what your intimacies are, requiring you to spend willpower to resist them in the first place. Such charms are the reason why integrity exists in the first place, to help ward against effects like these. For example, if you get hits with something like Hypnotic Tongue Technique, then Righteous Lion Defense will make sure that your most cherished intimacies are at least protected. For example, if you have the intimacy of, I will never betray my family and kin, and someone tells you to attack your lunar waifu, then you can point to Righteous Lion Technique and tell them to fuck right off. Alternatively, some of the stronger charms can outright shatter many defenses. If both of these options are currently lacking, then the face of your group might be able to help out. Normally, it's more difficult to overturn a decision someone else convinced your character to do, But a friendly player character using his charms to convince someone to not take a course of action is probably one of the situations that such a thing is acceptable to most people. After all, if your Dawn is convinced he can take on the Mask of Winters after toppling only a few bandit gangs and a single Dragon-Blooded, then maybe the Zenith or the Eclipse could talk him out of the fancy goth paint job that the Mask of Winters would give the Dawn over his face and charms. If the party face got convinced, well, some restraining might be in order, but try to be clear out of character so the other player is on board with that at the very least. Now, it may seem like I'm skimping out a bit on this, but trust me when I say these esoteric effects are literally endless. They can do almost anything at all. The main method of controlling them is trying to figure out exactly how to resist their effects. That's the most important bit, considering many of them bypass the social system entirely. Sometimes they don't need to bypass the social system, maybe requiring an intimacy in order to launch off their effects, but you still gotta keep in mind how to resist these things. If you think something's too powerful, ask yourself the question, if I was a player character and I got hit by this, how would I feel? Would this ruin the very concept of the character? Does this bring the story forward in a more engaging or enriching way? Try to keep these things in mind if you make strong, social, non-playable characters. And yes, even though some official charms may be very strong itself, that doesn't give you the justification to blindly use them however you please. Keep in mind, how does this enhance the story itself? And how would I feel as a player if I got hit by this? Larceny charms are a very good example of this. They're very fun for players to use, but if you throw an NPC against players that are using larceny charms, stealing their fancy artifact weapon they probably spent dozens of XP into, and then getting away with it, it will make the player want to punch you in the dick. Don't do this. Or if you do it, try to reassure the player that it's only going to be very temporary at best. Last but not least, your anima. One thing Exalted does very poorly, I find, is stealth. Sure, the stealth charms are fine. In fact, they're incredibly powerful for what they do. But you only have a finite pool of resources before you start flaring your glory to the world. Even if you're not anathema and a noble dragon-blooded, this is going to happen. If this happens in the social scene, are people going to immediately start becoming leery of a person flaring their anima, even if they know and are comfortable with that person being an Exalt? The answer is no. People looking upon Exalt flaring won't raise alarm bells of going, oh shit, he's breaking out the mind-bending charms. Cheese it! At very least, if they're not immediately aware of said Exalt possessing some sort of mind-warping powers beforehand. No. If other people know an Exalt is an Exalt, then whenever they see an anima flare at parties, then it's them trying to do their damnedest to convince others. It's the sweat and tension of the other person that's in full view of everyone else's scene. If people don't know if you're a solar or a lunar ahead of time, then yes, people are likely to run away in fear from the scary anathema. If you're an abyssal or umbral, then that would probably be most people will run away from you, regardless of the circumstance. And that's it for this video. I didn't go over the various social actions, as, quite frankly, I've already done so in a previous video. And the Exalted 301 post on social influence should give you a strong working example of how the social influence system works in a very detailed in-game perspective. So if you feel like I missed anything else, please leave it in the comments section below. As I said before, I'll happily do an additional video on any topic or important point I missed in the social influence system. This video also concludes describing the second of the two major systems that exist within the Exalted 3rd Edition. As a storyteller, if you know these two systems, that is, how to use combat and social influence, then you should be able to handle the vast majority of what the game can throw at you. In terms of future videos, I do have some other ideas, such as maybe a video series focused on players new to Exalted. But otherwise, I'm wondering what else you want me to cover. Do you want me to go more in depth about charm construction, be it individual isolated charms, charms part of a set, such as evocations or martial arts, or maybe even go full ham and describe how to make an entire splat? Or maybe you want me to discuss other things, such as go more in detail about how to plan out a campaign in depth, how various directions in creation can be handled from a storyteller's perspective. Explain some of the details of spirits and how they can be used during the gameplay. How about writing down new and evocative areas for your players to visit in the sense of the game? Again, I'm wide open for ideas of picking apart the smaller and final points of system or just running a game in general. Don't be shy. Go ahead and ask. So until then, take care and I'll see you next time.